Hello everyone, welcome back to Learn Economia. In this video, we will discuss demand for money. Before going to see what is demand for money, let's deal with money. We know that money is something that is used for medium of exchange. Now, demand for money means demand for holding cash. The demand for money refers to how people use money. It refers to how much assets individual wish to hold in the form of money as opposed to illiquid physical assets. We know that money is a liquid asset which can be used to buy anything we want from the market. Now, unlike demand for consumer goods, money is not demanded for its own sake. We know that money is used to buy goods and services, but it cannot be used as such. Now, we know that money performs basically two important functions. One is medium of exchange function of money, that is what make money to be used to buy certain goods and services from the market, and second one is store of value function of money. We can store money to be used in the future. Now, this demand for money is something that depends upon the volume of trade or transaction in the economy, and the modern idea of demand for money it is put forward by Keynes. Before going to see what are the basic formulations made by Keynes in his famous book, it is very important to know what are the other definitions or what are the other kinds of thoughts or what are the other kinds of explanations given by other schools of economists to discuss demand for money. Thus, there exists a difference in views with respect to demand for money by different group of economists. The explanation given by classical view is something which is very much different from what is done by Keynes. So, we have to know the different explanations given by different group of or different schools of economists to understand demand for money as such very correctly. Now, let's see what is the classical view of demand for money. The classical economists like Adam Smith, Ricardo, etc., they view demand for money as something in terms of medium of exchange. They recognize the medium of exchange function of money and they neglected the store of value function of money. They considered money as something that can be used for transaction purpose. They viewed that money does not have any inherent utility of its own, but it is demanded for its transaction motive. This kind of view is very clearly stated in Fisher's book, very famous book, Purchasing Power of Money. It clearly presents a classical approach to the analysis of the relation between quantity theory of money and price level. We will discuss the quantity theory of money in detail in the upcoming videos. Now, let's see what is the explanation given by neoclassical group of economists or neoclassical school of economists with respect to demand for money. We know that the neoclassical school has been pioneered by people like economists like Alfred Marshall, A.C. Pigou, etc. And for them, money does not serve only the medium of exchange function, but also it has other functions to perform, like the store of value function of money. The neoclassical theory assumes that the demand for real balance is proportional to the income level in the economy. Now, finally, let's see what is the view given by Keynes with respect to demand for money. For him, he identified demand for money as liquidity preference. That is what he called demand for money. That is the demand for money to hold. Now, Keynes has found answer to the question, why do we demand money? For him, people has basically three motives that drive a person to hold money. The first one is transaction motive or transactionary motive. Second is precautionary motive, and third is speculative motive. We will discuss each of these motives in detail. Now, moving to what is transactions motive or transactionary motive, and transactional motive for money is the money that people hold to pay for goods and services they anticipate buying. For example, if you wish to if you wish to buy a particular good from the market, then you have to pay the price of that particular good. So this is what is transaction motive is. The total number of transactions made in the economy tends to increase over time as income increases. That is what is expected. When you have when your income increases, you tend to buy more from the market. It can be more amount of a particular good, or you will buy a different good in more quantities, or you will buy a range of goods from the market. It depends on person to person, so it differs from person to person as well. Now, since it is a function of income, we can say that LT is a function of income. LT represents transaction motive of money. It's a function of income. Y here represents income. Now, moving to the second kind of motive that is mentioned by Keynes. It is referred to as a precautionary motive, and here it refers to the desire of people to hold cash balances to meet unforeseen contingencies. For example, we may meet sickness, accidents, or uncertain occurrences, unfortunate occurrences, etc. in the future. So even though we cannot predict about future, we hold certain amount of money within our hand to meet certain unforeseen or foreseen or unanticipated emergencies or contingencies in future. The amount of money held under this motive will depend on the nature of individual and on the condition in which he lives. For example, we know that there are people who come from different background. People who live in poor areas or slums are there, or people who live in flats are there, people who have good working conditions are there, people who suffer from minor health ailments are there, people who have different kinds of problems are there. So as a result, we can see that each person is different from others. As a result, the amount of money held under this motive by different people will also differ by person to person. It differs from person to person. Now, people do not know precisely when the need for such expenditures will occur, but they will make themselves prepared to meet that kind of emergencies or that kind of unforeseen contingencies in future by holding certain amount of money with them, so that they will make it available whenever there is a need. An important thing to note here is that the precautionary motive of money is also a function of income. As you have more income, you will tend to set aside a more portion of income, or a more proportion of, not, I can't say it's proportion, but a more amount of income for meeting your precautionary motive. As a result, we can see that LP is a function of income. Since both LT and LP, that is transactionary motive and precautionary motive, depend directly upon the level of income, Keynes has combined these two motives and he called it as L1. And since both these motives are functions of income, we can see that L1 is also a function of income. And L1 is interest inelastic too. Whatever be the change in the interest rate in the economy, that won't affect either precautionary motive or transaction motive. As a result, we can see that L1 is interest inelastic. Now, moving on to the very important motive that is specified by Keynes, and Keynes has given very much prominence to this kind of motive, that is speculative motive. And what he has said is that in a dynamic society there is no certainty regarding future. In such a condition, the store of value function of money is very much important. This is what leads to the speculative motive of hoarding money. The speculative motive relates to the desire to hold one's resources in the liquid cash form, or in order to resources in liquid form, in order to take advantage of market movements regarding the future changes in the rate of return. The notion of holding money for speculative motive is new, typically Keynesian idea. Before Keynes, none has specified speculative motive. As a result, the speculative motive is one of the contributions made by Keynes to the field of economics. Money held under speculative motive serve as a store of value function, and the cash held under this motive is used to make speculative gains by dealing in bond market or share market. And it is very important to note that if there is a fluctuation in bond prices, that will definitely affect the interest rate of bond. For example, if bond prices are expected to rise, which in other words means that the rate of interest is expected to fall, then the businessman will buy bonds to sell when the price actually rises in future. Bondholders who anticipate a drop in bond prices will definitely try to sell their bonds ahead of the price drop in order to avoid a big loss in the asset value. Here, a speculative motive is can be nominated as, it can be denoted as L2, which is a function of interest rate rather than a function of income. So, even though your the type of bond you buy or the type of share you buy, etc., depend upon the level of your income, here we can say that rather than income, it is the interest rate that affect the speculative motive for money. Now, the demand for an asset depends on both its rate of return and opportunity cost that we all know, and typically money holdings provide no rate of return and often depreciate in value due to inflation or price rise. The opportunity cost of holding money is the rate of interest that can be earned by lending or investing one's money holdings in either in bank or in bonds or share or etc. The speculative motive for demanding money arises in situations where holding money is perceived to be less risky rather than the alternative of lending money or investing the same in some other forms of asset. Now, let's see what is the relationship between the interest rate and demand for money. The quantity of money people hold to pay for transaction and to satisfy precautionary and speculative demand is likely to vary with the interest rate they earn from alternative assets such as bond. When interest rate rise relative to the rate that can be earned on money deposits, people hold less money with them. When interest rate fall, people hold more money with them. The logic of these conclusions about the money people hold and interest rates depend on people's motive for holding money. Thus, it would depend upon each person. It may differ from person to person how much that he or she is setting aside for speculative motive, how much that he is setting aside for precautionary motive, and how much that he or she is setting aside for meeting transaction cost or transactional motive. Now, here we can see the total demand for money in the economy. We have seen that the total demand for money in order to attain or in order to arrive at the total demand for money, we have to consider all the three motives, both the transaction demand and not only the transaction demand and speculative demand, but also precautionary motive as well. Here we know that L1 is a combination of transaction demand and precautionary demand or precautionary motive, and L2 is something that is that represents the speculative motive of the people in the economy. As a result, we have to consider both L1 as well as N2 to determine the total demand for money in the economy. We know that L1 is interest inelastic. At the same time, L2 is inversely related to rate of interest. L, which is the total demand for money in the economy, is the horizontal separation of both L1 and L2. Here, figure A describes the transaction demand for money, and figure B describes the speculative demand for money. Here, C represents the total demand for money. Let's see the demand curve for money. We have seen how the demand curve would be derived from combining the three motives. The demand curve for money shows the quantity of money demanded at each level of interest, other things remaining unchanged. An increase in the interest rate reduces the quantity of money demanded, and a reduction in the interest rate increases the quantity of money demanded. The relationship between interest rate and the quantity of money demanded is an application of law of demand. Here we treat money as a commodity, and the price of money, that is called the interest rate. So, as a result, we can apply the law of demand to money as well. If you think of alternative to holding money as holding bonds, then the interest rate or the differential between the rate of interest in the bond market and the interest paid on money deposits, this is what represents the price of holding money. As is the case with all goods and services, an increase in price reduces the quantity demanded. Having seen how this interest rate and price level, how this interest rate and like income affects demand for money, it is very much important to see what are the other determinants of demand for money. We have mentioned in the earlier slides that when other things remain unchanged and any change in the interest rate will lead to this result, and any change in the income will lead to this results. So it's very important to understand what are the other things. So these can be the real GDP in the economy. For example, the demand for money in the economy is likely to be greater when the real GDP is greater in the economy. It can be a price level. If the price level is higher, then greater the demand for money in the economy. If consider the role of expectations, if people expect bond prices to fall, then they will increase their demand for money, and vice versa. In the case of transfer costs, the demand for money will fall if transfer costs decline. Consider the case of preferences. There are people who place a high value on having considerable amount of money on hand, and also there are some people who place a less value on keeping more amount of money in hand. As a result, they will keep less amount of money in their hand. Any of these factors can shift the demand curve for money, not only the income and interest rate. So with that, we are going to end this video. I request you to please like, share and subscribe this channel for more videos. Thank you.